How you doing today, Mr. Sunheim? Today we're gonna be talking about demand and supply on the aggregate curve. And when we're talking about macro, we're talking about on the wider scale. So basically aggregate demand, aggregate supply is just our whole economy of the country. So as you can see, aggregate demand is just all the products demanded, and it makes, and this, and GDP makes up this. Now, you might ask, let me move this out of the way. Ask what GDP is, and GDP is just the dollar value of all goods and services produced inside the country. And it's made up of four things. And that is basically consumption, investment, government spending, and net exports. Now, through my country of Wakanda, we were talking about investments, which is just, capital and factors of production. That'd be me buying more trucks so I can move vibranium around and get it exported and things of that nature. And then my net exports is basically, let me give you an example. So let's say I'm the country of Wakanda and I'm exporting 1 billion tons of vibranium, and then I'm importing, let's say, 5 billion tons of, let's say, corn, because in Wakanda we have bad soil and bad fertilizer, so we can't really grow that much. So we got to import that. That means our next export is minus 4 billion. And this is how that works. Okay, now we're gonna move on from those four and back to this. Now, why is demand sloping down? Aggregate demand, why is it sloping down? Well, that's just, for the obvious reason, though. As prices go down, well, more people are going to consume or, demand more items. And supply, is going up due to the fact that as prices increase, more people are going to be entering the market and try to supply because they know they can supply it at higher prices. Now, moving on, you must understand that this is aggregate supply in the short run. And then this line right here is aggregate supply in the long run. Now, the differences between this takes into consideration the prices of goods and the wages. And this does not, because it's immediate. Now, what do I mean by that? Let me just go ahead and explain. So, let's say, for example, let me just explain how everything that this correlates with product possibility curve when it comes to how it moves with recessionary gaps and inflationary gaps. So basically, when you have like a demand shock, basically anytime like what causes the demand to shift, and we have a demand shock here, just like there was in the Great Depression, and it lowers the demand, this creates a recessionary gap, which is noticed here when you have the product that's here. You know what I'm saying? What your GDP is now producing at is a lot lower than your potential GDP. You see what I'm saying? And this is when you have inflationary, is when you overproduce, like demand shifts to the right and creates an inflationary gap. Just meaning you are producing basically over what you can at your GDP. Such as here, you're moving past what you have at your limits. Now let's see if I got everything on here. I define that. Now the worst part, the worst thing you don't want to have is stagflation. And that is basically the supply shifts up. It creates where inflation increases, which increases the price level, which also, I'm sorry, my dad walked in, also means that inflation increases because the price level increase, while also your GDP is going down. So your government is stagnant while the inflation is increasing, which is really bad for the economy. Now, when you have these shifts from demands, most of the time your government will write some sort of policy to try to close down that gaps. Or as you say, supply will always get you home, because over time, the wages and prices all come down, decreasing the supply and bringing it back to where GDP is supposed to be, long term, not short term. So what I mean is, you have a demand shock and it shifts demand down. And then supply is going to shift to the right and it's going to come back here. So you go from here to now you go back here and it gets you home. Same way when demand shifts up, supply shifts to the left, bringing you back. Did I get everything? I said recessionary, inflationary, show that. Okay, I think I got everything.